might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you.
There are currently over 1.2 million children in childcare, with over 17,000 childcare providers Australia-wide, and new centres open rapidly at an annual growth rate of 4.6%. Last year, the industry recorded a $12.4 billion profit, and the past 5 years has seen an annual revenue growth rate of 14.3%. This presentation will look at the determinants of demand and supply of the childcare service industry and provide a market forecast for the next 10 years. The main driver of demand for childcare is population growth. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, there has been a rapid growth in births in the past 5 years, with projected increases well into 2050. Given the current birth rate, the cohort of children in childcare age will increase over the next 10 years, that it's estimated to be 5 million children in need of childcare services by 2027. Demand also depends on disposable income, with higher income families being more able to afford childcare. With income rising, there's a greater demand for childcare. The level of government subsidy for childcare also determines demand. Previously, the government offered a childcare benefit which was income tested. This financial year, the government rolled out a new childcare subsidy scheme which will see childcare more affordable and accessible to more families. Labour participation is a key driver for childcare demand, as care is usually provided during parents' work hours. The more hours worked, the more demand for childcare. Female participation in particular is a determinant for demand for childcare, driven by the desire to re-enter the workforce. With female participation on the rise, demand is also predicted to rise accordingly. Subsidies from government forms a major driver to the supply of childcare services, particularly for the not-for-profit sector, which accounts for 38% of the industry. The industry is also heavily regulated and centres undergo strict development approvals. The number of childcare workers have been increasing. However, new reforms also mean more staff is legally required in terms of staff to children ratio, putting a strain on supply of qualified childcare workers until more new qualified staff enter the job market or existing staff undergo further training. Geography is also another major determinant of supply, where availability and cost of childcare vary from state to state, city to city, and suburb to suburb. In the city of Sydney, for example, in the suburb of Campbelltown, a lower socio-economic and lower participation area shows an average cost of $60 per day to place a child in care, compared to a more affluent suburb of Mosman in the North Shore of Sydney, where parents are paying on average $160 per day for childcare. So what is the current demand and supply for childcare? The current market equilibrium puts 1.5 million children in formal care at a cost of average $75 per day. Now, applying the demand and supply determinants that we've just discussed, along with the available data, we can apply the implication of these market forces and make predictions of the industry over the next 10 years. Due to the government subsidy scheme, which will provide increased accessibility and affordability to childcare services, demand is expected to increase 18.6% in the immediate 5 years, Under the same government reform requiring more staff to children ratio and childcare workers to be higher certified, supply will also increase but at a slighter rate, putting a new equilibrium of 5 million children in care at a cost of $95 per day by 2027. The government subsidy scheme will also mean an industry boom over the next 5 years, with a downward slope from then on, when funding is expected to decrease. With any government policy, there's always a threat of them changing, especially with a change in government. Budget constraints may mean cutback on childcare funding. The industry is also dominated by a small number of key players, with 3 major childcare enterprises accounting for almost 70% of the market. A corporate collapse of any one of these key players could cause drastic changes in supply and demand. This was seen in the case of ABC Learning, previously the largest childcare provider in Australia with over 1,200 childcare centres making an annual profit of over $1 billion, becoming the first childcare centre to be listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. In 2008, the company became insolvent, and its collapse caused a shutdown of most of its centres in the year 2009, meaning a drastic decline of supply across the nation. This disruption also meant a sharp change in price over the period, with major increases to childcare fees and placements becoming immediately scarce. This also created new entrants into market, with many small and home-based childcare centres starting up to alleviate the supply shortage. Since then, there has been many acquisition of these smaller centres by other major market participants, meaning consolidation of the industry. However, the trend of consolidating market can be a threat if a major player undergo corporate collapse as seen with ABC Learning. Consolidation can also be a threat to pricing of childcare fees, as this is a likely scenario as mergers and acquisitions are expected to increase. As mentioned, government reforms will lead to an increase in supply of carers to meet the growing demand. The new government funding regime will mean both childcare providers and service users can benefit from the new scheme that aims to provide funding based on activity testing, which better manages supply and demand in a more sustainable manner, as funding is determined on parent work activity, which better assess and cater for childcare needs based on the level of labour participation. This will stimulate both users and providers and therefore sustainably manage supply and demand. Since population growth is on the rise, the industry is a key investment area and creates ample of opportunities to offer childcare services in a manner that is more flexible and innovative. Recently, there's been online portals and mobile apps created to market and sell childcare services, much like the Uber for childcare, where parents can order and book a nanny to mind their children, just as they can book a taxi or Uber. On that note, I will leave you to decide whether this is the way forward for the childcare industry.